Hear me out, okay? I just want you to hear me out, okay? I really don't like the Snyderverse that much.
Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose.
So you were always like this.
DCEU was taken over by James Gunn after like fucking 10 movie flops and some of the worst superhero movies ever released. Maybe I'll actually spend my money to watch DC in theaters again. But this decision to reboot the franchise has divided some fans. Some are agreeing on the decision to reboot the entire franchise and the people who live in the sewers. And I don't mean by calling everyone who likes Zack Snyder's work a thief from the swamp. That is for the people that won't stop talking about the Snyderverse when it's long dead. It won't give James a chance. They put this universe in such a high regard because the fans won't acknowledge the history of the DCEU and their horrible, I mean horrible movies. Constantly bitching about how the new DC movies will flop despite the owner being on a superhero winning streak and haven't lost once. You can be talking about the new Superman TV show and some zombie from Left 4 Dead replies talking about how Snyder did it first. I'll get on with them in a bit, but for now, together we'll sit by the campfire and talk about why the Snyderverse was a bad idea from day one and why James Gunn's reboot needed to happen.
Please, just hear me out, please.
So get it out the way. Out of all the movies in the Snyderverse, I like 6 of them. But I shouldn't be crucified for that opinion or be whining on Twitter about how my precious movie universe was stolen from me. All of that considered though, the performance is very poor, considering 6 out of the 14 movies that were made were decent, while the rest were very mediocre or the worst superhero movies Hollywood has to offer. And the stands only focuses on the 3 movies that are directed by Zack himself without looking on the actual Snyderverse as a whole and looking back on its flaws. The MCU has terrible movies and TV shows coming out, yeah, but the community knows this and points out its flaws. The MCU fanbase is a lot less toxic and bearable than DC's fandom because it's the same degenerates fighting over fucking superhero movies on Twitter. Oh, sorry, X. So fucking stupid. Most of the movies were bad, and the Snyderverse as a whole just wasn't as organized as what Marvel was doing. This contributes to 2 things ruining the DCEU and DC's legacy as a whole in cinema, which is Zack Snyder and Warner Bros. And to explain that, we'll have to go back to 2013 with Man of Steel. When Zack Snyder released Man of Steel, it came with a huge lot of money at the box office, but with mixed reviews. Some see this movie as a good and fresh take on Superman, while others think this is a boring and uncomic-like portrayal of Superman. And both opinions I think are right. I do think that this version gets some things right and some things wrong. You still have to realize that Snyder's Superman is, like his version. I know it's fucking obvious, but let me get to the point please. Everything that Zack directs is his own spin on the comic that he probably never read. So comic fans had a right to be upset when they saw that the big budget superhero movie about the guy that we haven't got since 2006 wasn't anything like comic Superman and had the emotional range of wee bread. Sure, he does stuff that Superman does, but I don't really know, it just doesn't feel like a good Superman story. The movie is kind of too gloomy for my taste. Oh, so you wanted the MCU style? Yeah, I actually think it would have worked well for this story. I don't like Zack's decision to make the tone gloomy and have the color grading be fucking boring in this movie. Sure, it doesn't have to have jokes every second, but Superman doesn't have to be this boring and dark. People praise Snyder for including shots from panels in comic books, and I think that should be like the bare minimum for a comic book movie. And I don't think it matters that much if it's not used well in the story. I used to love this movie when it first released, but now that I'm reading more Superman comics, the film hasn't aged well. Most people who say that Snyder's DC is the most comic accurate superhero movie has most likely never touched a comic, in which you really should in order to see why people were upset with Henry's portrayal. Superman was stale, boring, and having no charisma with anyone. I still find it decent as its own take on Superman, but this so that Zack Snyder didn't really understand the core concept of the character. Or if he did understand it, that means he didn't execute it perfectly. But back then, people didn't think this and actually loved the movie. There was so much hype for the reveal that Superman and Batman would be in the same movie for the first time, and Ben Affleck playing the role as Batman, things seemed actually pretty good. In 2014, the new movie franchise will be revealed with big plans for the future. Fans wouldn't know anything about BVS for a long time, and watching the trailers back now, while really hype, it kinda spoiled everything about the movie, including the twist about Doomsday being in the movie. I don't know why they would spoil a huge twist like Doomsday being in the movie, as he's very big in the comics, but I digress. BVS finally dropped after a 3-year-long wait, and it received poorly. It did well in the box office again, but the movie was reviewed badly. You don't need me to tell you how this movie fails in everything possible, but I'll do it anyway. It's incredible that in the second movie of the franchise, they adapted the death of Superman and The Dark Knight Returns. One of them being built up naturally through other comics, and the other being an anti-hero who's insanely violent. This movie introduces Zack Snyder's Batman as an anti-hero who's insanely dark and gritty, with all the fun additions to his character, Gunn. The actual Batman that we were familiar with in comic and TV shows happens off screen. It's obvious that Zack wanted the film to be more edgy and dark in tone than it should have been. I know the whole purpose of Batfleck's character is that he lost his way and that Superman shows him the way back to being the Batman that he was. But like, why? Why did our first introduction to this universe's Batman have to be an anti-hero who lost his way? The most interesting thing about Batman, in my opinion at least, is his morals. When a villain challenges his morals, it's always so interesting to see how he would get out of a situation because it always puts him down a peg. And you can create really good Batman stories with this basic concept. Sure, there are many other aspects of Batman whom you can make a good story to, but his firmness to his basic moral of protecting human life makes him a very good character. He holds his morals and his justice. When faced with the choice of stopping Jason or let him kill the Joker, he stopped Jason. Ra's al Ghul and the Joker challenge his integrity insanely well in those stories and make some of the best Batman stories in a while. In the animated universe, Batman is also insanely smart and cunning, but also has a soft side and actually saves people. There's an episode where Clark presumably dies from Toyface, and instead of actually mourning his death right away, he investigates his death thinking he's not dead. But he keeps getting dead ends, and when he's finally done with his investigation, he talks to Superman on his grave, and he talks about how Superman showed him that the justice doesn't have to come from the darkness.
I've got some things to say. I should have said them when you were here, but despite our differences, I have nothing but respect for you. I hope you know that. You showed me that justice doesn't always have to come from the darkness.
Yeah, this sounds familiar to the ending in BVS, but the difference is that Kevin's Batman didn't go through the same murderous arc that Ben had. He was just more to himself and more brutal, like the Arkham games for example.
You're insane. You're just getting that now.
He didn't have to be this broken, murderous version in order to change. The only good Batman scene when he actually gets right is in the beginning. Snyder's disrespect to Batman and the source material as a whole isn't just as from a writing perspective, it's from his own mouth. He thinks that Batman not killing people isn't realistic in his world, which is very untrue because he's been in many scenarios way worse. Also, why does it have to be realistic about DC, the guy who's best friends with a fucking alien? Matt Reeves' Batman made an amazing dark and gritty story about the same thing. A broken Batman who only sees the way of justice from the dark, and his arc in that movie is finding out that he doesn't have to do that, does he have to be brutal? And a more efficient way to do that is to inspire hope into others. Snyder didn't have to make this Batman like this, but he did because of his flawed reasoning and understanding of the character. Superman is also similar in how Snyder treats him, but he isn't as butchered as Batman is. And as much as I've talked about this Batman, I like that Zack was trying something different. Even if it didn't work in my opinion, I'll give him some props for trying something different, even though personally I didn't like it. Side note, there's a part in the movie where Superman has to tell Batman that he was wrong and he needs his help. So they go to each other, and instead of Clark trying to reason with Bruce, he just pushes him. Many people say that Superman knew that Batman wasn't trying to reason with Clark, which could be true, but Superman has so many options to tell him something. He has fucking super speed. If it was so urgent to tell Bruce, why try to fight him? Clark said that he could kill Bruce if he really wants to, and Bruce knows this, which also contributes to that he can also really knock him out if he really wants to. But they still fight, and even when the kryptonite wore off, why didn't he knock him out there?
The way my schedule is, I don't want to do it. Shut your bitch!
Sure, he was weakened, but he still could have used his super speed, and he still was very strong. Instead of jogging towards him, somehow not seeing Bruce load the machine, even before the fight, instead of trying another time to attempt to knock him out or try to reason with him, he just throws him away. Oh look, it's the guy with super hearing that can't hear Batman move to decide to shoot him. Anyways, I'm done. I know we talked about Batman a lot in this segment, but he's a metaphor for the biggest reason why Snyder's movie just didn't work for me. He didn't understand the characters and just downright ignores core character parts for his own portrayal. And it's fine if a director tries something different on Batman, but not only does Batman suck from a writing standpoint, but that the official DCEU had this Batman from the start. Fans are mad because this is the Batman that Zack Snyder decided to give us for his own edgy sake, when there was so many alternatives that would have worked well in his favor. And this kinda sucks because the movie has some really cool fucking moments in it, but cool moments just don't carry a movie.
Hey, thanks for the gummies. Hey, fuck nigga, what you said? What you said, fuck nigga?
Sorry for talking about this movie as long as I did, but I really don't like it, man. I just don't. And many people did as well. When it came out, people called it the worst comic book movie ever made. It was getting hate from left, right, and center, and Warner Bros. Knew this. A couple months later, Marvel dropped Civil War, which was getting praised for, not being a shitty movie, and Warner Bros. Knew this. So they decided to step in and make everything worse. Everyone knows the story of how Suicide Squad came to be known as the worst superhero movie ever made. Apparently, David Ayer's original Suicide Squad was more in line with the tone of BVS, but since that movie was received so poorly, Warner Bros. Got people who edit trailers to edit the movie. The film now had more of a lighthearted tone similar to the MCU, but that didn't work for this movie. The film released and oh boy. Keep in mind, all these bad reviews happened in the 3 first movies of the DCEU, and critics and fans despised it. Suicide Squad was horrible, especially the editing. Especially the fucking editing, it's the worst. Warner Bros. Was not expecting this, and this starts the storyline for Warner Bros. Being the worst studio for DC. The first thing they did was ruin a guy's original cut of the film without his input, and then the movie flopped. Then Zack Snyder was making Justice League, and during production, unfortunately, Zack lost his daughter. So Warner Bros. Hired the writer of the Avenger movies to reshoot and re-edit the movie for a lighter tone because of failure of BVS. And the movie somehow topped Suicide Squad. Now before the witches come from under the bridges telling me that you shouldn't count it as part of the Snyderverse because it's not his movie. And sure, it's not his movie, you're right. But it still shows that the studio that was backing DC was starting to fold under pressure and making the movies more in line with Marvel's to bad effect. Joss really tried his hardest to make Justice League lighthearted and even reshot most of the movie and redid the script. Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg, would make the allegations about Joss Whedon, saying that he was gross and abusive on set. There were rumors about a weird scene between Gal Gadot and The Flash being written, and when Gal said that she didn't want to do it, Josh tried to peer pressure into it, but instead just got a stunt double to do it anyways. The behind the scenes stories didn't help with the film's reputation as it paled in the box office compared to BVS and Man of Steel. DC was in a really bad spot right now, but Warner Bros. Didn't care as they wanted to give the films a more lighthearted appeal. The same year Wonder Woman dropped, and the critics and fans actually liked the movie, me included. It had a balance between dark and lighthearted tone, and the film overall was actually pretty good. But after 2 huge flops, fans weren't happy with only having one good DC movie. And due to the horrible reception of Justice League, Whedon left DC along with the failed Batgirl movie. Along with that, the Flash movie was going through multiple directors and scriptwriters, and Ben Affleck stepped down to play and direct a new Batman movie. DC was dying, and it was begging for a director and screenwriter to make a good DC movie. 2018 rolled around and we finally got our first Aquaman movie, and fans were finally blessed with a not terrible movie. Many people like the movie even though I find it insanely mediocre, but what I praise the film for is its personality. It felt like it had some sort of soul, and it felt like not a DC movie. And it was also the film that DC needed. Next year rolls around and then we get a banger of a movie called Shazam. I think this movie is really good at telling the origins of Shazam in a lighthearted way. The comedy hit when it needed to, but it didn't ruin parts of the movie where it needed to be serious. In a way, Warner Bros. Is actually getting what they wanted since 2016, to make the universe lighthearted. Everything was going well, until COVID hit, and everything got ruined from there. Birds of Prey released before theaters shut down, but it was met with more mixed feedback. Even now, people doesn't even know it exists. It was just another bad and forgetful superhero movie. But sure, one flop after 2 decent movies isn't the end of the world. That's what we thought. That's what I thought. Until Wonder Woman 84 dropped. 84 was contending for being one of the worst superhero movies ever made again. It seemed that they lost what they had originally in 2019. This movie had terrible writing, a boring screenplay, constant continuity errors, and became so forgetful that many people didn't know it existed or forgot the movie's plot entirely. With the big 3 superheroes of DC getting ruined or pushed aside, this wasn't looking good for the future of DC. But next year, Zack Snyder will release the Snyder Cut. This movie, in my opinion, is actually pretty good, and many others would agree. This movie was a massive improvement over Whedon's Justice League and BVS. Batman isn't a fucking lunatic anymore, and instead acts kinda boring, but hey, still improved nonetheless, I'll take it. Superman and Wonder Woman acts kind of the same, and this movie introduces Cyborg and the Flash's origin story. Unfortunately, people won't watch it because of its long length, and I admit it really doesn't need to be 4 hours long, but this was the full vision of Zack Snyder, so I can excuse it. And don't get me wrong, this movie isn't perfect either. There are still many issues with this movie, but the Snyder fans was begging for this since 2017. Along with this movie, we get James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, which is the best DC movie in the whole universe. Unfortunately, it didn't make any money due to its R rating and its debut on HBO Max. However, it still went so hard, man. The fans loved it, the critics loved it, and compared to the first debut of the Snyder films, it was more critically acclaimed. Follow that up with a solid TV show on HBO Max, and James Gunn just speed ran the DC universe and got like high praise. Last year, many films were announced now that theaters were going back up. Black Adam first released and it sucked ass. Even though it had mixed reviews when it first released, people now see it as a huge potential was wasted with the movie being put down by one man's ego. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had a huge ego boost when making this movie and ruined Black Adam's character for the DCEU altogether. Not only is he a bad actor for the role, but he had some selfish things in mind when he planned for this role in the DCEU. Black Adam was supposed to be in Shazam, but since he wanted to be the big part of the movie because apparently the villain isn't big enough for him, he got his own movie. He also didn't allow Shazam to be in the post-credit scene of Black Adam and instead tried to push the rivalry between him and Superman, which is him again trying to gain the spotlight for no reason other than money and his ego. The movie didn't underperform by any means, but it was forgotten after it was released. This movie was the failsafe for DC, and since DC didn't get that big bucks, they let something happen. They hired James Gunn for paving the way for the new DCEU. And seeing all the movies that it's made, James made the good decision that it was just time to end it. During 2022, he announced his plans to reboot the entire DCEU, which ruined the chance for more Snyder movies, and most importantly, it recasted Henry Cavill as Superman. And this decision spawned the worst fandom ever known, the Snyder fans. During this time is where Ezra Miller decides to fuck up really hard, and I don't feel like getting into the details of what Ezra Miller did, but basically, he assaulted everyone that he saw in Hawaii, allegedly groomed a 12-year-old, kidnapped kids, and is non-binary.
Non-transgender, non-binary, I don't want to be searched by a man. I'm transgender, non-binary, and I don't want to be searched by a man.
However, Warner Bros. Didn't recast him for The Flash. Matter of fact, test screenings were so high for this movie and that Warner Bros. Already put so much money into The Flash already that it confirmed Ezra's place in the DCEU. This caused the film to be promoted as, hey look, it's the Batman. And oh shit, it's Batman from the fucking Stone Ages. People were rightfully furious that he was still allowed to play the Flash while Henry Cavill and others got replaced. Now in this year, and oh, the Shazam sequel dropped and it was a huge bomb at the box office because not enough people knew about its existence and the movie itself just wasn't anything special. Just another mediocre DC movie. Then we are at today with the insanely hyped movie The Flash. This movie had many credited actors and directors praising the movie, and it even brought back Michael Keaton's Batman as well as many other cameos. The movie came out and it flopped. Really hard. It became the biggest flop of the superhero genre and almost in cinema. Not only that, the movie was also mixed with reviews. Some calling it good and some calling it mid and some finding it to be another bad DC movie. Many reviews say that the cameos are cheap, lazy, and look awful. Oh yeah, and the CGI is the worst I've ever seen. The only good thing about the movie is that it resets the DC canon and that James Gunn can finally put his plan to work. And that's where we're at now. And now that I explained the DCEU's history, I had to address the disgusting elephant in the room. The Zack Snyder stands are sometimes even worse than the movie that DC puts out. And don't get me wrong, they were bad since like 2022, but ever since James Gunn has taken over DC, Snyder fans have been on their worst rampage yet, attacking any DC post or decision James makes. The fans are still bitter because they won't let go of the past, and now they're constantly questioning the Superman legacy will be good. Apparently they forgot that James Gunn is on a 7-0 winning spree. Since Gunn ruined their perfect DC universe, when someone talks about Gunn in a positive light, they trot along bringing a horrible stench along with a terrible take. These people do nothing besides tweet and cry about how James Gunn ruined their perfect DC universe without letting him cook for 1 second. Many Snyder fans seem to forget that all the other movies in the Snyderverse was flopping at the box office, received poorly, and was getting fucked over by the executives at Warner Bros. For years. Instead of trying to give him a chance with any other movies, they just complained. Unfortunately, Zack Snyder fans would not let James Gunn out of their grasp when Blue Beetle drops because it is destined to die. The marketing has been little to nothing for that movie, and Superman Legacy is being more searched up than Blue Beetle, and the movie just looks mid in itself. Besides, the original DCEU was confusing, non-coherent, and very messy compared to Marvel before Phase 4 and 5. And if someone didn't step up and take it over, it would have its effects for a long time. There's a reason why people enjoy Marvel more than DC. It's not because someone not understanding your movie, it's because the universe was ruined from the start. Also because crying on Twitter won't do anything about it. You know the 14-year-old kid who worked on the Lego scene in Across the Snyderverse? He made a comment about the Martha scene and the stands just went fucking nuts, like they had absolutely no mercy. Maybe people will take you seriously if you actually just, shut up and be more reasonable. People complain about superhero movies all the time, but the difference is they actually have good points and they aren't annoying if a person disagrees with you. It's fine if you have different opinions than me, but don't beat someone to death if they dislike Henry's Raw Superman or support James Gunn's new universe. While for some people it sucks to see Snyder's vision having some potential in ZSJL, but the audience gave his universe in DC just too many chances. And if James Gunn's new DC universe flops, then sure, go ahead, make fun of it. Just give it a chance. Actually, no. Just watch the animated universe, it's 10 times better. Subscribe if you like this video. My voice is fucking done. It's ruined, it got used. I'm not gonna say that. You can tell my voice is like not nice. I've been talking for an hour, my voice is lost, and I'm tired. My work is done. I'll see you later.